This is your Forge News interview with Jack Carrington, the Yorkshire Party candidate for Sheffield Central. Hello Jack, how are you doing?
Hi there, doing well, thank you.
So what would you say the Yorkshire Party's main priorities are this election?
It is a very, very clear demand for not just more devolution, but substantial devolution of the sort that most of the world's democracies enjoy. So things like transport, infrastructure, even things like health, the sort of powers the Scottish Parliament have been enjoying, and in fact the sort of powers that provinces in Canada, Germany, all over the world enjoy and are able to essentially use to further their own prosperity and, of course, national prosperity.
What is it that the Yorkshire Party can offer students in particular?
In terms of specific policies, we are quite, as you can imagine, quite decentralised in how we let our candidates essentially campaign on the issues that are close to them, and so there's never a Yorkshire Party candidate that will ever be found campaigning for or saying something they don't believe in. So in terms of my priorities, there are obvious things like when students might be first starting out on the job market, things like reversing the withdrawal of, say, housing benefit and things to people up to 25. That can be quite important. And then obviously the big question or problem facing the country at the moment is negotiation of Brexit and trade afterwards that keeps as many opportunities as possible, as well as sort of expanding the number of industries and potential avenues of employment available to the current and future graduates.
Why should students who don't hail from Yorkshire originally consider the Yorkshire Party this election?
As said, the Yorkshire Party's main aim is for substantial devolution, and that is something that works the whole country over. It works the world over, frankly. So that is a clear demand, not just for Yorkshire. It's not something that stops at the border. This is a settlement. We want to work for the whole country. At the moment, about 80% of all spending is conducted from Westminster. In Germany, it's the other way around. Over 80% of spending is at the sort of state level and below. And when you have a structure such as that, you get decisions that are more accountable, more targeted, more efficient. You get a more prosperous economy. And that's, at base, what will provide the most life chances for students going forward.
Isn't a vote for the Yorkshire Party just going to be a wasted vote? There's very little chance of you winning the seat.
If you look at the largest policy change we've had in this country in the last couple of years, that was essentially triggered by a domino of events by a party that sort of got up to 2 MPs once. I think it's quite clear that you can send messages that are listened to if it can be demonstrated there are votes behind them. It's not necessarily about winning seats being the only way that you can influence politics. So, no, I think both myself, Natalie Bennett, Shafik Mohammed are very aware that they aren't going to be replacing Paul Blomfield on May the 9th. But it's about what they're standing for and having those messages then taken and listened to more seriously by the signals they send.
What is it that the Yorkshire Party sees as coming from greater devolution?
There are many things, but I think that the most obvious is probably we could look at schools, for example, where per pupil funding is half that of London. I mean, this isn't just a slight difference on, say, wage levels to compensate. This is a symptom of how a London-centric, Westminster-led spending in a vast array of areas leads to. Another one would obviously be transport. So as far as central government's concerned, the priority is spending about a third of the transport budget for the country on basically going to the north and leaving it again as fast as possible through HS2. The route as well, again, planned from London. So you have it originally only going to Meadowhall and now essentially not serving high speed to Sheffield at all. And there's plenty of other lines and projects that would do so much more for the economy of the north and the economy of Yorkshire, if only just even a fraction of those decisions were be able to take care that they were to our priorities. So, for example, I'm generally in favour of high-speed rail, more additional high-speed rail throughout the country, but it is you can tell that the priorities are London-centric by simply where does the line start? It starts in London and it slowly works north. Why shouldn't it be starting north and working south once they finally decided where they're going to have all their extra runways?
Do you actually believe that people want more devolution? There are extremely low turnouts at council elections. The North East in 2004 rejected devolution comprehensively, 77% to 22%. Do you believe that people are actually going to get behind this idea?
The North East referendum in particular is a very good example of something almost designed to be a poor offer. I mean, I don't think people looked at that and saw powers moving closer towards them. They saw extra policies, they saw duplication rather than a reduction of the centre and powers moving towards them. So if you proposed a Yorkshire Parliament and rather than say I believe it's 26 cabinet members, in Germany they run the whole country at the federal level with 12. I mean, this is an example of how bloated we are at this the centre. So I think for devolution to be successful, you can't just have a little spending chamber. You need something that justifies its own existence. You need radical, significant, let's say, devolution, a whole array of powers that people understand in their own lives. And the additional thing, seeing power at the centre being reduced, so it's not a duplication. So we don't need 100 ministers, many of them, for example, in the Department of Communities and Local Government, many of whose job is basically to tell Sheffield whether or not it's okay for them to have an IKEA and take 3 months to do it. I mean, you talk to anyone in Europe, in Canada, in Australia, that sort of story, they almost wouldn't believe you. How can there be such a tight stranglehold on such basic and small decisions that surely should be left up to local areas and local communities?
Having read the Yorkshire Party manifesto, they have a commitment that they won't ever expect one of their MPs to follow a party whip and always to represent their own ideas. Surely that means that the Yorkshire Party is a non-party and is just a single-issue group that wants devolution.
Is that such a bad thing? I mean, it does mean that you know what you're voting for. Any other party, they will normally campaign and normally claim to be in favour of 90% of their manifesto, maybe going off record on a few things. But they are very heavily whipped from the centre. They're all given messages that they attempt to parrot and get across. And then, who knows, it could be a few months, it could be a few years, the next leader gets in and suddenly the person you voted for is standing for something completely different. So that's mainly what we're in opposition to, sorry. We're making sure that when people vote for a Yorkshire Party candidate, they know exactly what they're voting for. They can trust what they say. And that's why they give them that freedom, because we believe in politics done ethically, in the Bell principles, which I believe should be gone into at length on our website as well.
If you believe in devolving powers away from Westminster, then do you support Scottish independence?
I think there's a difference between devolving. It's about powers at appropriate levels. And I mentioned one which was, say, a planning application going to someone in Whitehall being an example of power being exercised at the wrong level. Again, transport, infrastructure, a lot of education spending. There's so many things that would be done better, closer to people. When it comes to things like national defence, I mean, I could just reel off a thing like the Yorkshire Secret Services, the Yorkshire Navy. This is not an appropriate or a particularly efficient thing to desire. So, personally, I'm a very mild unionist when it comes to Scottish independence, but ultimately it's a decision for the Scottish people. And when it comes to Yorkshire, no, I don't think independence would be an appropriate constitutional settlement. But certainly there is such a huge gap between where we are now and where we should be. I can just leave it there with that statement. It's such a huge gap.
No worries, that's absolutely fine. So do you have any kind of final thoughts or anything that you would like to say to the people of Sheffield University when they go and make their vote on the 8th of June?
I think it's probably to put a very strong logical counter to some of the messaging that I've seen going out, which is about 3 different leaflets, both claiming that they only have 2 choices. So I believe the Greens will say that it's either the Greens or Labour in Sheffield Central, and if you don't, it's the Tories will happen nationally. The Lib Dems, again, pretending that only they and Labour exist. And you get these messages all over the place. Although you have politicians who sort of embrace democracy in rhetoric when they say visit universities and schools and say, like, this is brilliant, you have such a plethora of choice and it's your decision. And then they send you a leaflet saying, actually, no, you don't really have much of a choice. It's me or this other thing. And I just want to make it incredibly clear. This is your vote. You should vote for what you want. You should send a clear vote for what you want. I've shared my firm belief, and I think anyone sort of looking at the statistics would agree. Paul Blomfield will almost certainly be returned this election, but whether that's on 40% or 55% makes no material difference. What will make a difference is to what extent the result in this seat and across the country shows what people's priorities are. And I think a strong vote for devolution will have that issue taken seriously in a way that Conservative, Labour and coalition governments have simply either completely ignored it, done the reverse and centralised, or merely done crumbs from the table, or, like Osborne, mainly done essentially branding and rhetoric with not too much behind it.
Perfect. Well, Jack Carrington, thank you very much.
Thank you.